Hey, audio people all over the world. This is Graham from therecordingrevolution.com. I really hope you're having an excellent week. And if you have a few minutes, I've got a mixing tip for you on bass guitar, specifically DI bass, how to make a DI bass go from to fat and full and awesome. And these are three quick things you can do in any DAW. Here I've got a DI bass guitar. Again, DI, direct injection. It's like you're plugging your bass guitar directly into your audio interface or your mic pre. So if you've recorded bass this way, this might help you. Here's a bass unmixed against some drums that I've started to mix, and take a listen to this part and then we'll see if we can make it better. All right, that's the bass part. Here it is by itself. Not bad, but with a couple of tweaks, it can sound like this. Versus bring it back. Okay, it's kind of subtle, but if you paid attention, you would probably notice two things. You'd notice the consistent volume changes, so it's a fatter, consistent tone, a little rounder, fuller bass tone, a little less thin, and just it's a little more present than it was. And this really becomes apparent in a drum mix or obviously with other guitars. But here's the big thing with DI bass. It can sound lifeless, and sometimes in a mix, it's hard to get it to cut through, okay? So what we want to do is use EQ, compression, and saturation. Those are your three things that we're going to use. In this track, I'm using the included channel strip that comes with Pro Tools 10, simply because it's a great compressor and a great EQ all in one, so it's easy to use. I've got, in the order, I've got the EQ running first, technically. So look at the bottom of the channel strip here. You'll notice what I've got. I've got a simple filter that's rolling off up to 25 hertz. So it's a high-pass filter, cutting off everything below 25. I have a cut around 566 hertz in this example. Why did I cut there? Well, take a listen. Here's what's going on in that frequency range. Just kind of that nasally, DI, mid-rangey, thin tone that I don't really like. So I kind of swept around and found, usually in the low mid-range, sometimes it's 3, 4, 5, 600 hertz. Sweep around until you find where it sounds cheap. That kind of sounds muddy and cardboardy also right there. So if you didn't like that, you could simply pull it out, widen the Q, and pull it down, in this case, 6 dB. Bypass the EQ. What this does, in a subtle way, is remove some of that mid-rangey, low-mid stuff that's not helping the sound, and then that reveals more of the upper mid-range where the plucking is, and the lower mids and the low frequencies where the bottom is. So instead of having to boost either one of those, you're kind of finding what doesn't work in the middle and the low mids, which in plugged in DI bass guitars, there's usually some frequency down here that just doesn't sound pleasing. Just boost like crazy and you'll find that frequency, and then pull it out 3, 4, 5, 6 dB, and it'll clean up the overall sound. Now also here, what I've got is a little notch at 70 hertz. I've taken out 3 dB of 70 hertz. Why have I done that? Well, on my kick drum, it looks like I found a sweet spot here on the kick drum EQ at 70 hertz that I've boosted at 3 dB. I really liked where that sounded on the kick drum, so to get the kick drum to cut through, I have taken a little bit of that out on the bass DI. So all I've done with EQ is rolled off a little of the low, found that mid-range that's not really sounding that great, pulled it out, and I also notched out a bit for room for the kick drum. On EQ, that's all I've got. Then up on the compressor, which is up here, a compressor is going to really help your DI'd bass guitar because it's going to take those plucks that are kind of quiet, like in this example here. There's a pluck, 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 and then there's a couple, like a quiet one, and then it gets loud. Without it, you hear the volume difference because it's just naturally quieter. But a compressor will help every bass pluck to sound the same volume and to push through the mix at the same volume. So I'm using a simple 2.8 to 1, almost 3 to 1 ratio, medium attack and release. And I just dialed down the threshold until I saw about 3 to 6 dB of gain reduction. Take a look. There's 3. There's 5 or 6. So what it's doing is turning down some of these louder peaks, probably this one, probably this one. It's turning them down, and where I've got the threshold set, you're seeing it turn down about 3 to 6 dB, maybe consistently average around 3 dB. So what that allows me to do is take the gain knob, which is after the compressor, and turn the whole bass track up by 3 dB. And you can level match. So on the left, I've got the input volume. You know, it's hitting -6 peaking, and I've matched the gain to have the same output volume. And what that means is that the quieter parts are going to be just as loud as the loud parts. So take a listen to these few notes, and I'll turn the compressor on and off. No compression. You hear how it gets quieter there, the fourth note, but then you bring the compressor back on. Just a nice, consistent bass guitar volume. That's all I'm using the compressor for in this case, is to get a more consistent volume on every single pluck. So every single pluck is more consistent. I've taken out some mid-range that's not pleasing. I've scooped out a little bit to leave room from the kick drum. And at this point, the only other thing I'm adding is some saturation. This is the saturation knob from Soft Tube, but any tape saturation, any kind of analog saturation modeling plugin, I'm talking really simple, Massey's tape head, the analog channel from McDSP. I mean, goodness, there's so many. Some DAWs have these like built into the DAW. Just something that will dial in some harmonics that you can add on top of the bass guitar signal, and it brings some presence. It's kind of like distortion, but it's really subtle. And this is a nice touch. Here's before. After. So it adds a layer of harmonics to the signal, which is usually pretty pleasing. These are, I know, really subtle, really small things, but I want to get you to think about scooping out some of the mid-range with EQ, compressing to even out the signal, then adding a little bit of saturation back in, and in the mix with the drums, with and without, here's the effect. Here's without. Bring it back in. So I know I'm exaggerating, I'm turning up the bass guitar so you can hear it, but it's that subtle difference that allows the bass to just push out and be there in the mix. So on your next mix, when you're working on a bass DI, try to think through the EQ, carving it out, compression, saturation, and that might be just the trick that you need to get that bass DI to come to life. I hope that helps. Again, this is Graham over at therecordingrevolution.com. Subscribe to the channel if you like the videos, if they're helping you out. Leave a comment, definitely, if it's helping you out. And feel free to follow Twitter, Facebook. Head over to the site, grab the ebook, jump on the discussions there on all the other posts that are happening at therecordingrevolution.com every single week. Have a great week, guys. Make some great music. We'll talk to you soon.